I'm on mute. How's everybody doing? My name is Ryan Tamori, and some of you tuning in are probably like, why the hell is it just this guy? Ed, Rick, everybody will be joining me later. Busy show today. We have the first summer basketball press conference that was today. Eric and Ed went. They're going to be joining. They'll be talking about that. I wasn't able to go. We'll break that down. College football news, UNM with their roster additions. We'll talk about that. I think a lot of people are tuning in regards to UNM men's basketball, and we will get to that. I'm an avid college football fan, so you'll have to bear with me. I don't even think I introduced the show properly. My name is Ryan Tamori. This is the Pit Press Live. We're happy to have everybody watching. Want to thank our sponsors, Abrazo Homes, Hydrobar, Affordable Solar, Turquoise Desert Taproom. Usually we start off with the panel or the gang, the usual suspects, as I always say. Not today. We are going to do what we did last year and bring in a summer football series, like post spring football and gearing up towards August. Plus NCAA football comes out in about a month. So with that said, we're going to start off with a guest. He is a writer or contributor. And you know what, Sean? I got to start off with it. Hold on. Anytime I talk about Air Force, he is a writer for Mountain West Wire. You can find him on X at Mountain West MWC Wire. He covers the United States Air Force Academy. I already said that. You can follow. I'm already zoned in on Kenny Loggins, but you can follow him on X at PSeanU. His name is Sean O'Toole. Senor, how are you doing? Welcome to this show. We really appreciate you.
Hi, I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
You cover, you're very knowledgeable about Air Force, but you're in Pennsylvania, which I love. And I don't think you said, first question, I don't think you've ever said that you've been to an Air Force Academy game, have you?
No, I have. I've been to.
I lied.
No, I have been to the games. I've not seen them in all of their commander-in-chief rounds, which is a life goal, right? So, but no, I've only been to the academy itself though for one game. I've seen Air Force at a few different places, but never outside of FCS appetizing season opener a few years back. I've not been to the Springs.
No, very, very cool. We will I'll hit some topics about last year and looking forward to next year because, with NIL, the service academies, it's almost like they get depleted. But the Falcons lose several players who've accounted for almost 3,000 yards rushing last year, which is about 80% of their total offense. How does Air Force fill the void when the team loses its top quarterback, fullback, tailback, and they do throw the ball with their slot receiver?
Yeah, so look, it's not going to be a match for player. It's going to be one of those kind of combination of the pieces. I'm not sure the expectation is reasonable to match those type of numbers. I mean, John Lee Eldridge, he found himself in an NFL minicamp, right? Highly productive runner, and fullback. They've done a really good job of reloading. Emmanuel Michel was just under 1,000 yards last year. Owen Burke chipped in almost 500. So like they got a lot of production from the fullback spot after the GOAT Brad Roberts graduated a few years back. So they did a good job of kind of using multiple people to make up that production. They're gonna have to do something similar this year. We got some sample sizes, right? So if you look at at fullback, for instance, Dylan Carson was a sophomore last year, really productive guy. He's going to be someone that's going to be leaned on to really carry the load this year. So they're not proven depth there though. And if you've seen anything with Air Force, right, the fullback's the first read, and it's a lion's share of the load for making their offense go. And the other part that's kind of buried the lead in all this is the arguably most consistent and best offensive line, maybe in college football every year from a running game perspective. They're gone, like too deep, gone. Poof. They're out. Like every starter on that Air Force offensive line essentially was an all-conference performer. They're all gone. Their backups, who they actually platoon a lot of linemen, they're mostly gone also. So that production is a little bit deceptive, but I think they have, again, as good of anybody in the business as an offensive line coach and Coach Lebowski. Really, really good job of developing players. So it's kind of, it might not be giving the proper gravity to say it, but and Coach Lobo, I trust, right? I think I think he's going to deliver on the offensive line, but the production and talent they lose at running back, to your point, it's big. I mean, that's 27 tuds on the ground just between Eldridge, Michelle, Larrier, and Owen Burke. So that's a lot. The big thing, like John Lee Eldridge, for instance, he was a home run hitter, right? He averaged over 7 yards a carry, which is actually down from the year before. There are two guys that are coming back, though. Aiden Calvert's going to get some carry. He averaged over 7 yards a carry. And so did their slot receiver, who chips in with Harris from the slot, got some carries. He averaged 7 yards a carry. So there's some guys, they're just going to see more workload now, right? Like a Dylan Carson's going to see a lot more workload as far as the distribution of carries go. So that it's a lot of production to make up. I'm not sure it's going to match right yard for yard. They're probably going to have to be a little more creative, which I don't want to jump too far into what's going to happen under center. But I think schematically that's going to affect some of what their run production looks like also.
You stole my thunder for my next question, but I had the pleasure of meeting center, and his name is Thor Paglialong, for those listening. And when I first met him, I was like, there's no way your name's Thor. He looks exactly like, if you've seen pictures, he looks like a Thor Paglialong.
Plays like one too.
No, and he it's like that. It's like a name, but a nickname rolled in. I don't want to say anything stupid, but I had the pleasure of meeting him and oh goodness, the safety that got drafted.
Trey
Taylor last year at Mountain West Conference Football Media Days in Vegas. You and I were talking a little bit off the air. I mean, he's all conference. He's the anchor on that offensive line. And you've already touched on this, but it looks like they have to, too deep. They're having to replace the entire offensive line. They are built on running the ball. And I don't know if you kind of answer it in your last question, but like when your mind, for somebody who is a fan like you are, but also covers the team, how does that hurt them?
I mean, again, it's so much experience, right? Like a lot of you hear a lot of if you listen to coaches talk, especially on the offensive line, it's a lot about chemistry, right? Like there's a lot of continuity that goes in with that. These are multiple year starters across the line they just lost, so to expect to fully replicate that, it's probably not reasonable, right? But they've done a really good job. They have a program, right? They have a way of developing players at the academy, right? Most times freshmen aren't going to come in and play. So they have a good development program that goes in. And they've actually, by academy standards, they've recruited pretty well on offensive line. So I think you'll see that some of that manifest in what comes out on this year from the running game and in the pass game too. But for the offensive line, it's just there's so many. There's probably 10 guys that are gone that were serious contributors. They got a couple guys that got a little bit of play, but overall, it is a complete overhaul. So I think what happens a lot of that is that will dictate a lot of what kind of plays you're calling, right? So there might be an element of that, but they're a team that really doesn't face an identity crisis, anyways. I mean, they know who they are. There are certain athletes they get there to run within their philosophy. So that's why they've done such a good job of reloading year after year after year. You look across college football, there's not many teams that have won, and I'm not talking about in the Mountain West. I'm talking about in college football. In the last 4 complete college football seasons, very few teams have won as much as Air Force, and that's because they have a culture there. They develop players there. And I think that's probably going to be, that probably more than anything is going to lend credence and some confidence to how they develop their offensive line. They got a fantastic offensive line coach. How he is still there is beyond me. I think it's a testament to his commitment to the academy. Coach Obotsky was an Air Force graduate. But he does a fantastic job. So I think that has a lot to do with their success. Also, he's such a humble man. He probably would never take any credit for that, but that's the reality of it.
Well, Troy Calhoun went to the academy, right? He served
Yeah, yeah,
in
he
the
was a
Air Force.
quarterback.
That's right. I mean, that's just a different kind of dedication. I think,
It is.
what they go through day to day. I had I've been to Colorado Springs. I saw UNM in 98 or 99 get waxed by Air Force in Colorado Springs. It was homecoming and they flew like, I don't know how many different jets, and people, it was awesome. I'm sure they still do it. If you've never done that, to anybody who loves college football like I do, that's something I recommend. I don't know. There's just an allegiance. I think being with it in the conference, I know there's an allegiance, but that's a perfect segue to my next question, because Troy Calhoun enters his 18th season as the head coach of the Air Force Academy. I think since that time, UNM has had 4 different coaches. So the discrepancy in the programs. He's 130 and 82 overall, 77 and 54 in Mountain West Conference play. He's led the academy to 13 bowl games, I believe 6 straight from like 2006 to 2011 or something like that. But he is quoted that he's never seen turnover like this, but he's still remaining diligent and optimistic. He's experienced, he's won there, but what do you think about that comment and his unknown going into 2024?
Yeah, so I mean, look, the turnover hits this year a little different. One of the reasons is you'll hear some people talk about these turnbacks. There's no red shirting at the academies, right? The military academies don't have red shirt options. They have what Air Force during the COVID year was turnbacks. Essentially, a cadet leaves the academy for the semester altogether, then they return and they can have restored a year of service or a season to eligibility to play. So during COVID, you just saw the last wave of them graduate. So that's where you had a ton of extra experience baked in. It's kind of like you almost got that luxury of a redshirt season through those turnbacks. So I think that actually made it a lot worse. It exacerbates like some of that attrition. But it's not hyperbole for a guy who is let's just say he's very creative with his words and how he addresses media and questions. But it's not smoke and mirrors. It's not coach speak. I think they're in the bottom 10% of returning production in college football altogether. I think 5 starters are returning. They got some contributors, but the starters they have returning. To your point, how do you cover it? Well, they have 2 of the best players at their position in the conference coming back on defense. Camby Goff, he actually got injured last year, but really didn't play. A lot of people forget this guy's an all-conference performer. Played since he got play time as a freshman. Fantastic. He kind of bounced between that spur linebacker and safety. Really high impact player. He's back this year. He'll be healthy. And Peyton Zadroik, who is just an absolute menace in the middle of the field, he's back again. So you have 2 of the best players at what they do coming back. At corner, they've got a lot of experience. That's actually where they have probably their most experience is at that defensive back area. So those players are going to have to carry a lot of the load right until the rest of the team really catches up. But that's really, it's think about it, right? It mirrors the concept of the academy in the military, right? You look for leaders to lead, right? And these players are looked upon, right, to step up and take those roles. So I think he's probably really leaning heavily on those guys that have the game experience and kind of had their noses bloodied. Those folks to really help accelerate that learning curve.
That was a very good answer. I have to go to one of the comments. No, we started at 8. It's a JB. I'm a little late. Were either of you guys at Lobo basketball practice today? Are we going to get a review of that? Hopefully it didn't happen already. It did not happen. We started off the show different today. We are doing a summer series on all the football teams in the Mountain West Conference. Plus, Sean lives in Pennsylvania. So I don't think he was at Lobo. You're in Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, I missed that one. I missed that one. I missed my charter.
No, he was not at the pit listening to Richard Santino today. We will get to that later. But joining us, and I've had you on my radio show when I was on 610 the sports animal. I've had you on my podcast, and now you're joining us on the Pit Press Live. Very happy. Sean O'Toole is an Air Force contributor with Mountain West Wire. And I'm going to preface this with my terrible sense of humor. Have you ever seen the movie Total Recall, the original with Arnold Schwarzenegger? And you'll see why I'm getting to this.
I have not. Of all the bad, obscure 80s, 90s movies I've seen, I have not seen Total Recall.
It's a complete mind expletive. I highly recommend it because I think it's one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's best movie, and you will see why I'm asking you that random question. Safety Trey Taylor was drafted by the Raiders in the 7th round. We mentioned him. Linebacker Bo Richter. There's a line in Total Recall.
See at the party, Richter.
So he's my favorite name. Bo Richter, and linebacker Alec just for
see at the party, Richter.
And he rips a guy's arm off on an elevator and throws him on. And the actor's name is Michael Ironside. It's a great death scene. Anyway, and linebacker Alec Mock signed undrafted free agent deals. This is new for the Service Academy within the last couple of years with players being drafted. I think it's a Joe Biden policy. Not getting political. I think Joe Biden actually did allow that to happen for listeners. But I think the Mountain West didn't have a lot of guys drafted, but I think when I see 2 undrafted free agents, I knew who Bo Richter was, knew who Trey Taylor was. We talked about Thor Paglialong. There's a little bit of a decline in Mountain West Conference football, but when you see a Trey Taylor drafted and with how good that defense was, and you see these 2 linebackers get picked up as undrafted free agents signed, I mean, what does that speak to Air Force football? And I think I already know the answer, but what kind of players are they getting?
Yeah, look, they're not drawing a bunch of 4 and 5 star athletes. There's no NIL money. There's no car dealership funding like Ohio State's had going on for quite a long time before NIL. There's none of that getting people to the academy, right? They have a special profile athlete. I think what it verifies is you can play the highest level of football at the academy, right? If you want to go to the NFL, it's still a pathway there. Is through the academy, right? They develop players. You think about what goes on to these the cadet athletes, but the way the culture they develop, they really do develop players, right? It is you're not typically seeing players who after their 3rd year on campus enlist to go to the NFL, right? They're going through the full burden of their commitment if they've seen it through, and by that time they've had some of the best coaches in the world, right, invest in them, and that's not hyperbole. I mean, you're talking about really good coaches. The guys you just talked about were on the defensive side of the ball. So Coach Noor, who's the defensive coordinator, he's clearly demonstrated he can develop players year after year after year. So like, while I sit here with all the consternation, like, who's going to replace these folks? It's actually happened before, right? Like the cycle's longer this time because guys like Alec Mock, he's been at the center of the defense where he played as a freshman even. So like, there's some of these folks who have long-term careers there, been playing for quite a while, but they develop players. They have a process, right? So I think they lean on that more than anything. They don't deviate from who they are and what they do as a program. And I think that's actually why you see there's talented people you can get in that aren't necessarily 4 and 5 star prospects out of high school. You get the right people in the right positions and who are willing to do what's asked and develop, and you see what the fruits of his labors are. One of them is the best defensive back in the country last year. That's not an exaggeration, right? Trey Taylor was recognized with the Thorpe Award as the best defensive back in college football. He played at the academy. He served the military in his time there. I mean, you can do it. There are athletes that can do it.
Once again, a very good answer. Thank you for that. Joined by Sean O'Toole, and I didn't queue up any Irish anything. I mean, my name's Ryan, so there's some Irish in me. I'm very sorry. I didn't come up with a bad joke for that, but I know you're in Pennsylvania. What do you know? I don't think spring practices at the academy are like the most. I don't know how they are.
Yeah,
I guess advertised. But what do you know about spring practice?
Troy County is not the most open book about what's happening in the academy as it is, right? But out of spring, there is a lot, right? They're breaking in a lot of players. So typically this is where you'll see like position changes, jockeying. So the number one thing, like in this spring, most people who follow Air Force or even the Mountain West, it's you're replacing a quarterback, right? It's not just the quarterback. So Zach Layer came in and did a fantastic job. He's a track champion of the Mountain West, so he clearly he had wheels. He ran the offense really well. He was a really effective passer. People didn't realize, I don't think coming in, how good he was going to be throwing the ball. So, but move beyond Zach Layer, who was outstanding last year. Jensen Jones played a lot. Zach Layer got dinged up. Jensen Jones came in and played. Jensen Jones had a lot of experience. Having a backup when you run the kind of offense Air Force runs is invaluable. They're going to play. It's not if, it's when. Jensen Jones, he's graduated. Beyond Jensen Jones is Ben Britton. Ben Britton was with the program a long time, understood the offense. He got playing time here and there. Again, Ben Britton graduated, gone. So it brings now to John Boucher. He was a sophomore last year. He got a little bit of playing time. If you just look at statistics, they're misleading. He got thrown in very obvious passing downs in an offense that's not really what they're tailored for. But the most important thing is he got playing time. He is the presumptive starter going into camp and exiting camp. What happens behind him is where it'll be really, really interesting. So that's probably the most scrutinized thing in camp. Obviously, getting out healthy is always very important. But then the other side is replacing these guys, right? These folks who we talked about going to the NFL on the defensive side of the ball. So you need to replace a pass rusher, for Bo Richter, who just again was a savage on the line. There's one of the people who's actually one of the top rated recruits they've had, which again, you can't glean too much into the recruiting standards for Air Force. The recruiting rankings for Air Force, because just candidly, people who commit this year, most of them are going to be going by the next year or year before their junior year. It's just the nature of turnover at the academy. That star rating doesn't necessarily guarantee anything. But Jack Curtis was a really, really well-ranked recruit, one of the top recruits from ranking perspective that Air Force has gotten since they've been doing rankings. And he's probably someone I would expect to see vying for time. So like players like that jumping up the depth chart, moving into roles where they're going to see significant time. Some people who weren't even contributors last year are going to be potential starters, contributors. All that stuff was flushing out right now. I mean, for spring ball, you're to your point, you're replacing the running backs. It's seeing who's gonna be in there. And we talked a little bit about that fullback spot. The middle of the defense is huge, right? Alec Mock's been anchoring there forever. They also Jonathan Youngblood, who was a fantastic linebacker. He's graduated. So inside, they're probably going to have to figure out who's going to cover there. An upperclassman, Asar Ai, he's going to be back. I think he's someone you may expect just being an upperclassman, being with the program. But players like that are the ones who really, really leverage and have to kind of really step in this fall, the spring camp. That's when it happens. That's when you see all this movement. And with all these openings, right, that's what it's looking at is who are the people that are going to fill these spots by these, now what they just graduated this week, right? These folks that just graduated. That's what most of spring ball has been about, and it's going to continue to be ongoing through fall. You're not going to see probably a 4 to 5 depth chart probably until the third week of the season, which is not that unusual for a Troy Academy team anyways, but more so now than ever, just with the unpredictability of who's going to be on actually playing, because these are folks who weren't even necessarily traveling with a team last year, might be playing significant roles this year. Very, very important that gets flushed out in spring.
I think the graduation was today because I was looking at
really? Okay.
I was looking at some extra information on Air Force football, and that was the vice president was there, and then she was talking about D-Day. So that's that because
I'll refrain comment there.
It was more along the lines of D-Day because the U.S. history degree and post Civil War and Reconstruction on in this country. It's I have to watch Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan every year at this time. So I lost my thought on my next question. I'm terribly sorry because I was talking about Band of Brothers. This is an odd question. Right now, Air Force ranks dead, or this is not an odd question. This is some, I think, BS that ESPN made up and pulled out of their butt. Right now, Air Force ranks dead last in the entertainment and sports, ESPN, returning production rankings. ESPN says that the ranking system is based on who's returning for each school from last year's roster. I mean, you've kind of touched on it very quickly before we get in the schedule. When you hear that, I mean, as a Troy, you've kind of mentioned it, as a Troy Calhoun coach team, I still don't expect anything less from them from being tough and a hard-nosed team at all.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think their DNA is a lot of why they're able to kind of suffer a lot of that attrition and endure it so well, and actually thrive. I mean, look at the win totals that over the last few years. You don't think there's been attrition and turnover over the past 5 to 6 years? Look what their record is over that period of time. I think it's about that. It's about knowing who you are. Like, they have a philosophy. They run an offense and a defense and a system. They're all complementary to one another. Make no mistake, that they really are. And it's not by happenstance that people that are in positions that are playing, you see playing on Saturdays or whichever day of the week now, college football, they're playing for Air Force are there because they're there and they execute within a system. And that the predictability of that, it's really, really hard to surmise how important that is until you're one of these teams that are getting throttled. These teams that have 4-star prospects, players that would have, honestly, Air Force should have no business competing with. And at the end of the day, they're looking at a scoreboard and quite the deficit after they played this guys from Colorado Springs. It's remarkable. It's why I love Air Force football and military academy football in general, right? I think it's everything is right about college football, which unfortunately there's less of that in my opinion right now. But the way they're able to do that with these rosters, they've proven, right? They have a system, they got a recipe, and they don't deviate from that recipe.
I've seen a game in Colorado Springs at the Air Force Academy. I've been at West Point. I've never been to Annapolis. It's just unique, and West Point, the way it sits, and you understand why we were there. But everywhere you go, it says beat Navy, and then they had like a little thing that says beat Air Force. But I love when all three of them play. I do, and I know Troy Calhoun's. It's probably the Michigan-Ohio State thing where we can go 1-11 for the year, but you have to beat the team from up north or the team down south. He probably wants to beat Army and Navy both years. But I look at, and again, we're joined by Sean O'Toole from Mountain West Wire. He's an Air Force contributor, Air Force writer. I look at the schedule, and CBS and Fox have had Mountain West on for the last 2 or 3 years, maybe even longer than that. And then now, which breaks my heart, that the SEC on CBS is no more. But I look at the schedule: Merrimack, San Jose State, at Baylor, Wyoming, Navy, New Mexico, Colorado State, Army, Fresno State, Oregon State, at Nevada, at SDSU. All of these games are on television. You've got several of them. They play Navy on CBS. 4 of their last 5 games are on Big Boy Network, CBS, Fox. And then they've got a couple games sprinkled on CBS Sports Network and one on FS1. The only game not to be determined on a channel is at New Mexico. But Air Force, 2 questions for you. Air Force getting a lot of eyes on them nationally. That's a good thing. How do you feel about that? And secondly, how do you look at this schedule? You go in a 2-week span, you get Merrimack, who I did not know had a football team. And then 2 weeks later,
if you're not in Massachusetts, you probably don't know it's there, right?
Yeah. I mean, I watch all of the, my dad went to Fairleigh Dickinson, so I watch him with basketball there in the NEC. But you open up with Merrimack, then you get in the grunt of playing Army Navy, and you get the Mountain West schedule, and then you're at Baylor, and it's on FS1. The first question: they got a lot of national TV exposure that pans out well from them. And 2, how do you think their schedule fares up, and can you see them replicating something like a 9-4 season from previous year?
Yeah, so the TV exposure is great, right? One for the academy, it's that exposure for any school, right? You want to advertise your brand. Their brand of football has been second to none. People can scoff, say whatever you want about the type of offense they run or that they're in the Mountain West, but the bottom line is the team wins football games, right? They don't talk about winning football games. They don't talk about and this other ancillary BS about promoting their personal brands. This team wins football games, and they kicked a lot of people's heads in the process. They've done a lot of that in the last couple of years. So to get a lot of the national exposure is really good. One, from recruiting, right? I mean, this team, they're not like a lot of schools, they have right footprints of where they recruit. Now look, like Texas, Florida, those are big hubs, obviously, that Air Force is going to recruit, but they are a very national recruiting team. So the advertising on TV is good, but it also goes to reinforce the fact, again, you can play big time football at the United States Air Force Academy. So to answer your second question, man, it's daunting. It's hard to see a replication of the win total from the last couple of years, solely because the lack of predictability, right? Predictability comes when you have these known commodities. I mean, they've routinely had the best offensive line in the conference, if not one of the best in college football. Defensively, and there's statistics to validate this. It's not just some fanboy speak, right? You can look and see where just how good they've been defensively. They've reloaded really well, but man, they've lost a ton of production, right? You talk about a Bo Richter who accounted for like 20 tackles for loss last year. You talk about, we already mentioned, Trey Taylor, but there's so much experience lost from them. That's hard to replace, but I think, again, consistency is a key. What they know who they are. So I don't think that it's hey, we're going to be. Some people say, it's a rebuilding year, right? That this is a complete reset, kind of like what Baylor sort of endured a few years ago, right? They took some lumps after peaking, and then they went through a bit of the rebuilding phase. In New Mexico, right? You've heard this how many times? I truly believe it's an embraced reloading at Air Force. They've proven that they have a recipe that works, and I think they'll lean on that this year. I don't know though. I could say all that, and now I'm ready to contradict myself, right? There's a certain point where you can't deny the type of players that are gone. I mean, these are elite generational players for Air Force that are now gone. So in the schedule, you look at it, it's pretty daunting, right? You just look at the injection of Baylor and Oregon State in there. Those are tough tasks, especially as a year goes on. Last year, Air Force had that 4-game skid at the end of the year. Just the wear and tear of what is demanded of you as a cadet. There's no denying what that can do as for the athletes as the year wears on. So I think it's a pretty tough schedule, to be quite honest with you, when you consider what they've lost. So the ceiling is probably the type of season they had last year, because again, there's enough there that once players have been able to prove themselves, get some experience, and see what they have, they very well could. There's not a game on that schedule that you look at and say that's a cast off. There's no chance they're going to win. Boise State's going to be tough. Wyoming is always just a mess, and it makes me sick. And I don't want to vomit on screen here, but Army is just a problem for Air Force, and it's they've been a real problem, and they continue to be a problem. So those are all going to be really, really tough games. I think it's probably they're probably going to fight for bowl eligibility this year. They should beat a bowl eligible team. They've got enough pieces coming back, and they have such a good coaching staff. They have such a good program. I think that matters, right? The consistency, they've proven it year over year that they've done a good job of developing guys and replacing guys. So the guy from your neck of the woods, right? Hazik Daniels. I mean, the guy was an absolute stud for 3 years for them. And, everyone wondered, what are they going to do? It was last year. And last year, they just blew out the gates so well. They were running through the conference. And then slowly their quarterback that replaced him, Zach Lario, got hurt. And then, the season started to stumble. It wasn't all quarterback play, right? There was some tough games and losses. UNLV ended up, learning they're a really good team last year. Boise State's a really good team. So those teams are all there. They're all on a schedule this year too. So I think a realistic expectation is, probably right between 8 wins. 8 wins would be pretty optimistic in my assessment. But I think it's going to be a fight to bowl eligibility, which, it could be a good thing. A lot of experience. I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if they won more than 6 games, but they'll have to earn it. There's no cakewalks this year, quite honestly.
There are. I had to you that with that one. Sorry, they're beating Merrimack and they're beating.
They are. You're right. That's true.
That's true. That's 2 wins. for their sake, maybe I hope they can get to 6 or 7 wins and they find themselves in the New Mexico Bowl, because any chance I get to watch any of the 3 academies play, it's an awesome experience. His name is, and I got to do it. Got to do the logins, man. I'm sorry. I hope you heard it, but he is a contributor, and I'm happy we have built this friendship with you coming with you being a guest on shows I've hosted. Let me say that properly, God. But anyway, Sean O'Toole with Mountain West Wire. I've really appreciated, man. I think I had you on like 2 years ago when I was on 610. Like I mentioned, you came on the podcast. I'm repeating myself.
It's an absolute privilege. I mean that. Absolute privilege.
Well, no, I've appreciated your time. When we come back, and I'll probably bug you the week of October 12th when Air Force comes on down to UNM. When we come back, we'll have you on. When we come back, Ed Nunez, Eric Malton, Rick Thompson's going to join me, and we will be talking Lobo basketball. We'll head out to a break. My name is Ryan Tamori, and this is the Pit Press Live.
Let him cook. Let him cook now. Let him cook. I said let him cook. Let me produce the show as I try to host the show. Hey, my name is Ryan Tamori. This is the Pit Press Live, as if I'm knowing what I'm doing. Really, really appreciate Sean O'Toole from Mountain West Wire. He's awesome. He's a plethora of knowledge on Air Force football. I won't go to anybody else when we talk Air Force Academy football. So very happy to have him on, and he recapped spring football and looking forward to the 2024 season. And in case you care, since we're a UNM centric podcast, Air Force will come down to UNM on October 12th and most likely beat them at University Stadium. So just an FYI there. Going to do that consistently throughout the summer. Next week, I'm going to try to have somebody on from Boise State because my OCD is kicking in. I got to do it with in alphabetical order. Want to thank our sponsors: Affordable Solar, Brazo Homes, Turquoise Desert Tap Room, Hydro Bar. I think I'm forgetting somebody in there, but we appreciate all of you, and I meant no disrespect by that. I will get to the gang, the usual suspects. Happy to have them on talking basketball, because people were asking about basketball as we were talking football. My business partner, who has, I think, joined us once since having another child. His name is Eric Malton. Welcome back to the show, man. How you doing?
Thanks, Ryan. No, I'm good, guys. Excited to jump back on you. For a second, I didn't think I was going to be able to get on. I had my internet crashed like 5 minutes right before I was able to join, but seems to be working out now. But excited to talk some Lobo hoops. Ed and I were actually at some of the practice today. Ed was able to attend the press conference. Lobos are big. They're long. They look athletic. Lots of exciting things to talk about, and I look forward to kind of chopping it up with you guys.
He is the voice of the Western New Mexico. He is the voice of the New Mexico Western New Mexico Mustangs. Wow. And a Lobo fan since 1970. His name is Mr. Ed Nunez. Ed, how you doing?
Good, Ryan. Like Eric said, it was an exciting practice, very competitive. I had to stop myself from clapping a couple of times. I like to see that. And so I enjoyed the press conference. I really enjoyed watching them get after it. So, yeah, like Eric said, a lot to talk about.
And all the way from the Bay don't play. He's a two-time offensive state lineman at St. Pius. He's played for Damian Segura, Wally Salata, and as I always embrace his most prestigious accolade, an MVP of a 35-year-old men and older Filipino league in the Bay Area. His name is Mr. Richard Thompson. Rick, how you doing? Long time no see.
I'm doing good, Ryan, gentlemen. Nice weather out here. Excited to hear about what Eric and Ed saw out there and maybe touch on some other Lobo football stuff. So thanks for having me back.
Yeah, a lot to get to. Anytime I could talk Air Force Academy and I can play Kenny Loggins. And then give this sound clip from the movie Total Recall.
See you at the party, Richter.
Talking about Bo Richter, the Air Force linebacker who got signed as an unrestricted free agent. So anytime I can zing in terrible pop culture references, I'm all about it. I want to start off before we get to what you guys saw at the first open practice today. I wanted Ed and Eric's thoughts, and Ed, I'll start with you. Drew Gordon and his passing. He was sadly killed in a car accident on May 30th in Oregon. You and your son, Nick Nunez, were trying to do host your show. I shouldn't say trying, we were hosting it. And you had Brandon Mason on last Thursday. He knew about the news and we kind of mentioned it on air there. It was kind of really sad. But I just wanted your overall thoughts on Drew Gordon.
You know, I was talking to Hunter Green was talking to Jeff Grammer about that as we walked into the practice after the press conference. And, you know, when it happened, when we heard about it, and Mace had said that to me in a text that there was some super bad news, but he didn't want to say what it was. And then when we found out about it, you know, he was a solid ball player. And we talked about big men that had been effective in New Mexico. And sometimes you forget. You're like in the moment and people will say who was really good. And he was, I think he averaged 13 and 10 in 61 games here after transferring from UCLA. And, you know, he's a big man that could hit the mid-range shot, rebound, set screens. The screen setting for a big man, when you play big the way he did, it was certainly a big part of Steve Alford, you know, when he played here from 2009 to 2011 or 12, I believe, you know, after transferring from UCLA. So, yeah, it was really sad news. And God, only at 33 years old, I think that's the thing that shocked me the most. And when, you know, Brandon Mason talked about coaching his son, you know, at ABC Prep, I think that really hit me too, because, you know, kids shouldn't lose his dad at that young age. And then when you talked about Ruben Douglas dying at 44 and Andre McGee, the former Lobo, dying at 52, you had 3 Lobos die in a month, and they're all pretty young. You know, they're you know, Andre McGee only 52, Ruben Douglas 44, and then Drew Gordon, 33. So yeah, just hearing Hunter and Jeff Grammer talk about it in the hallway over there, kind of you know, again, sad news about Drew Gordon, no doubt about it.
Rick and I kind of touched on it last night, and it was no disrespect to Drew, how phenomenal of a player he was. And I always forget about him. And I mean, no disrespect. It's just because all the big men, and he was dominant. And as we mentioned, the dunk against Louisville, but he did much more than that. Eric, I wanted your thoughts. And you're on mute.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to close out of a screen, but yeah, obviously,
And you're on mute.
unfortunate and sad news to hear. Kind of just shocking to hear. I was actually listening to both episodes that you guys had on, the one last night and then the one where Ed and Nick had Brandon Mason on. Man, you could just kind of feel the air being sucked out of the room. You could feel the emotion kind of coming basically through my phone. I know it was difficult for the news to break like that, and I feel for him and all of Lobo basketball, right? Like I was talking with Roman just over Twitter and Instagram. He was sending us some messages, and everyone's just kind of in disbelief in how connected and close those guys were back then, but still are now. And they all have families, and they're all closely connected, and we just feel it kind of just as a fan base. But what I remember most about him, obviously the Louisville dunk that he had in the NCAA tournament, but his overall athletic ability, being that size. I remember when we first got news that we were going to get this big time recruit, right? He was transferring from UCLA, and we're like, wow, that guy's coming here. And we didn't really at the time realize how good and how big of an impact he was going to make when he was here. And he kind of showed just about everyone and put UNM basketball on that map, and was kind of part of those programs that kind of uplifted the program regularly in the tournament. I think he was he player of the year in the Mountain West one of those years that he was there? I don't remember.
think so. I
Maybe it was
gotta
his
look it up.
junior year
It
or
was
his
all
senior-
conference.
Yeah.
All conference. Okay, so maybe first team all conference, but he was that type of player. But yeah, I mean, my feels go out to him and his family, and obviously leaving kids behind. I just had my second kid. She's 6 weeks old now, and I couldn't even imagine, man. But you guys all kind of had some heartfelt feelings about it, and I think you guys all said the right things. And I think as time kind of moves on, we'll be able to get some other guys like Roman and some of those guys that played with him to come on and kind of share some stories about him, because I think that there's just a lot of light and a lot of happy times that need to be discussed, that just kind of share his impact that he left on the world.
He was the Mountain West Conference 2010-2011 newcomer of the year. And then was
Newcomer
second
of the year,
team.
okay.
Yeah, and then it was second team all Mountain West in his first year. So yeah, that was again sad news, and our I hate saying this, thoughts and prayers, which are stupid, but our everything that they're feeling going out to the Gordon family, it's a sad tragedy. So obviously thinking and talking about him and reflecting on his great, basketball skill set and career. But in other uplifting news, not trying to segue terribly, first press conference of the season, which again, no other, very few places in the country where basketball is a precedent over football. And it was right here in Albuquerque today. Richard Pitino spoke at the podium. Jeff Grammer got some zingers in. Eric, Ed, you were there. Donovan Dent talked. CJ Nolan talked. I do have some sound bites from Pitino. Here is the first one, just to kick things off.
Anytime you have a lot of new guys, you get excited. Like, oh, we're going to miss those guys. There's no doubt about it.
I guess I thought I had more to that. He was talking about MASH and, or he's talking about a lot of the new guys. Ed and Eric, you were there. I totally botched that. I'm sorry. What were your thoughts today on what Pitino had to say? And Ed, I'll start with you.
I thought you're right. Jeff Grammer hit him with a couple zingers, and one of the things he asked about right away was giving the keys to Donovan Dent. And Coach Pitino kind of pulled back and said, well, I'm not ready to give the keys to anybody yet, but I think we all know that he is. Donovan Dent is the key to that Lobo offense. But Coach Pitino, with a bunch of newcomers, doesn't want to just say that. He said a lot. One of the things I think he said was about the schedule. The schedule really it really got my attention there. We've got brand names in playing St. John's, and playing UCLA, and playing Arizona State. So that's an improved schedule. He had mentioned it in the paper that he thought it was one of the best non-conference schedules in Lobo history, and I might tend to agree. And what he said about that, he said a lot. He said a mouthful. You know, he said that the NIL deals, he's not sure how long this can be sustainable. That kind of you got piqued my interest too. I'm sitting up a little bit like, okay, you know. Talked about chemistry, talked about the work they're putting in during the summer. He kept saying this too. Remember what he said after the season was over. We need to get longer. We need to get more athletic. He kept saying that more, or at least 3 times. If you look at the roster, we're longer, we're more athletic. You know, he kept putting that point out there. And so I thought it was a very positive press conference for his first one. And then, talking about the players that they had brought in. And I think sometimes you forget it, you know, and Eric and I were able to see the freshman Dotson and Milovich in action. God, Milovich, man, and I kept telling Eric this. That guy's built, man.
We'll get you to pronounce it right, Ed. It's okay. Milosevic.
Yeah, Milosevic. But God, he's so but go back to the press conference.
All right. I pronounced Mondragon Mondragon. So sorry, go ahead.
No, that's up. Yeah, Milosevic. Yeah, so I think seeing the new players, and then I've got to say this too. I have to be fair about this, and this is not a knock on anyone. I'm just going to say Steve Kirkland. Kirkland? Is Kirk? Okay.
Steve Kirkland.
Couldn't have been more professional, more accommodating, more, it gave me the roster when I walked in. He identified players because nobody's numbered during the practice. And he made it a point to point out who players were because they're not numbered. When I left, shook my hand, said thanks for coming, Ed. I mean, that's a pro. That guy's a pro, man. He really is, and I appreciate his professionalism. So, you mentioned it, Ryan. It's June. It's the time around football, but not here. Everybody's salivating, and including me. I had to, like I told you at practice. I remember what you said about not clapping, but there's some plays I'm like, wow. I told Eric, I'm like, man, look at that.
No, I don't think they care there for that. You can clap there. I think it's more along the lines we're at the games.
Okay. I just kind of was trying not to, but there was some action there, and we'll get to that later about the practice. But a competitive practice, some very physical plays. I love it. I love that kind of stuff, man. I really do. And it was just a great. I got to say this as I'm glad you brought me on to be part of the Pit Press podcast, and that I'm able to do that. Later this afternoon, I went out to Highland and watched the defending champions practice there. They're practicing until June, and I was able to sit there and talk to the team afterward. Coach Woody let me talk to the team. So it was a great basketball day for me. But going back to what you asked originally, that press conference, I thought there was a lot of things he touched on. And I think one of the things that really stuck out to me was about the NIL deals. He said that, and it kind of made, I think I even said something to Jared Chester, like, hey, man, listen to that. So it was very entertaining. It was an enjoyable day. I really, 2 hours of the best time I've spent in a long time.
Don't tell your wife.
Yeah.
Who's Z Mountain Shout? I didn't cut that clip. Who's the starting 4? Who are your starters? Looks like to me we've got a battle for small forward among the 2 Serbians and Sacco and Amzil at the power forward. I didn't clip it, but that was Jeff Grammer's first question. And Pitino said, I'm not answering that. I've made that mistake. I'm not telling you now. I don't know if I want to call it friendly banter, but there's some quality banter that I've seen at these press conferences between Pitino and Jeff. Eric, you're the guy on this. You're the NIL guy. I could care less. Although I think it's good that the players are getting paid. This is Pitino on the NIL
stuff. I mean, it's got to be.
And I got to preface it. That's Will Weber asking the question, but I loved how Pitino interrupted him there.
It's a disaster. It's a disaster. No way around it. It's I don't know who to blame. I don't blame the kids. It's never been better for them in their lives, and they need to capitalize it. There is a small window for us all in this profession to make as much money as we possibly can make, because they're not gonna. It's just, you got to take advantage of it. But yeah, there's no such thing as this system anywhere in sports.
Eric, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think he's right. With basically no restrictions on anything now, or really nothing in place kind of regulating how NIL functions, how the transfer portal functions. There's just nothing kind of filtering any type of movement. And these coaches and these universities, these programs are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because they're having to reconstruct a roster every single year. You're dealing with players on 1 year deals essentially, so everyone's a free agent at the end of every year. um, Retaining players is a priority, but then also kind of backfilling some open spots on your team that you have to either hit with the portal. And Pitino did address it in his press conference that he likes to have like a 50 blended approach to it, with hitting it hard in the portal, but making sure he can go after some of those high school seniors to kind of fill the roster from that perspective. And we touched on it like early, I mean, maybe a few episodes ago, with because the portal is so active and because there were like 3,000 names in there at one point, something ridiculous, that it gets a little saturated. And one thing that coaches really aren't necessarily paying too close attention to anymore are the high school seniors. And there's a lot of guys that are kind of being undervalued or under recruited. And Pitino did touch on that maybe Kate Dotson, Milicevic, and that Daniel Thomas are kind of fit that bill where they might be either under recruited, undervalued a little bit. And Ed can attest to it. We were there. We saw it in person today that these guys are really skilled to be coming in as true freshmen. Daniel Thomas looks long and athletic, but he moves like he's on skates, man. He's just like so fluid. He's really good with his hands. He's got some up and down ability under the basket. He's got a quick first step. And then Milicevic is just, I text you guys that right after I left. He's just a freaking monster. I mean, not only is he 6'9, 6'10, but he's a thick 6'9, 6'10, can move, can shoot it from the outside, can expand the defense a little bit, extend guys, force them to guard them outside on the perimeter, where he's a really effective shooter. So, like, there's just so much upside and a different look to this team this year. And I think Pitino's approaching it the right way, I think, with a little bit of portal and then a little bit of the freshmen coming in. I think that's the way you do it, because I think you have to build some type of stability within your program. And if you're just like a Kentucky or like an Arkansas, having to reconstruct 100% of your roster is just impossible. And the amount of money that comes in and out of that and having to arrange these types of deals is just, it's exhausting. And I think, Ryan, you shared a post with us on Twitter or Instagram with that baseball coach that is like heading into retirement. I'm not sure what school it was, Tulane or
Coastal Carolina,
something like that. Coastal Carolina, right? And they're a good program, but he's just like, it's just exhausting. And I can't imagine having to deal with that year in and year out. It's not the way it used to be anymore. It's a completely different ball game now. So everyone knows it, and I think there needs to be some type of, I don't know, managing factor or some kind of regulation, at least giving these teams and programs some level of direction. And Rick, I think you were going to say something.
No, I guess just the other thing I took from the press conference kind of related to the NIL deal was, the leaving of JT Toppin on the day before the portal closing, and what a blow that really was to them. Maybe not a surprise, but still put them in a difficult spot. And he did, although, say he understood the decision and understood why JT took that offer. And the other thing I found interesting in the Donovan interview related to NIL is he flat out said that other schools were contacting him. Well, he never went into the portal, to my knowledge. So does that mean that schools were illegally just contacting him, and that's what we can expect going forward? Because he flat out said that other schools are reaching out, and he had many talks with the coaches. So to me, that was something related to NIL that was super surprising and scary. As a Lobo fan, if our best players are getting talked to behind closed doors, that's not good looking forward. And I guess the other main things I took from the conference was just both Donnie and Coach talked about how they needed to add that size and how they were exposed against Clemson, and they admitted that And I guess in my head, the one thing I see this roster lacking right now is consistent 3-point shooting. All their 3 best shooters from last year left with Baker, Mash, and House. So I'm asking you guys, was anyone making any outside shots today?
No,
You
I
know,
don't think I saw too much of that. Ed, go ahead. Go ahead.
Not
A lot of
everybody
it,
at once.
They had specific drills they were doing, and a lot of 5-on-5. They did some 3-on-3s, pick and roll, post up. There were a lot of physicality with the bigs, with the coach holding the pad, posting up, pushing back. But I think that's a legitimate question. Where they did have shooting drills, and I was watching with Channel 4's Lee Faria, and they're Washington, Donovan Dent, Doma Sanchez, and Dotson were in one group, and we were right in front of us, shooting corner threes, other corner threes. And I was watching True in particular, and he had some, and he missed some. And I don't know that either Donovan Dent or Washington are fluid 3-point shooters yet. They've still got to work on that. Dotson took a look at that, and I think he's, a work in progress. And so, today's full court action was more about situational. He did yell at Philip Bavorkin. He did yell at him one time because he had a corner 3, and I told Eric this. Eric and I were sitting right next to each other. He didn't shoot it, and Coach Pitino stopped practice. Said, "Hey, you've got to shoot that shot." But going back to your point or your question, Rick, there's a 3 right there. But I think Amzil, they still expect him to be that was a beautiful shot by Bavorkin. But I hope
I've always wanted this, and boom goes the dynamite.
Yeah. So I think that's a legitimate question. But I got to say this too, though. People asking who's going to be the starters. Look, it's about practice. They just practiced for the first time. I think you're going to have Nelly starting, obviously, and Dent. Those are 2 starters right there. And so after that, I'm not. I'm Nelly and Dent and probably Amzil, I would think, and then we'll see after that. I don't think you can name a starting 5 right now. I don't. The other 2 players are definitely in question. And Lee Faria asked me this. He asked me a lot of questions today. Who do you think is going to have a monster season? He asked me. And I said maybe Nelly. I thought, maybe he'll have a breakout season. I mean, we already know Dent's going to be Dent. Who's going to have a breakout season besides that? And I think with all the guys they had, I asked him about what he thought about Quentin Webb. It lost amongst the trees, right? Is guys like Webb and people that are that are still here. Braden Applehands and one of his comments too was he didn't think Braden Applehands can guard a lot of people, and I said that too. It's hard for him to guard in space. He doesn't have foot speed to guard when they spread the floor on him, but he could shoot. He could shoot. You asked about a 3-point shooter. He could definitely shoot. I didn't see him knock down a lot today, but they had shooting drills on the other side. CJ Nolan, and I know that Jacob's real high on him. He was, they were on the other end of the court in another group, and he was knocking down some threes. So, Rick, I think we'll have to wait and see on that one.
And I guess my other question. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rick.
No, I was just going to say, I see Jovan shooting the 3 here, and that does look nice. But was he also guarding Nelly on the other end? And if so, was he able to hold his own against Nelly in the post? Because I see him playing the 4 and maybe even spelling at the 5.
I don't think too much of that was really revealed today. They look like, and a lot of them were these set drills, right? Like they were starting kind of around the free throw line in this circular motion, basically working on like a transition, move the ball up the floor, get into a quick offense, move the ball around. Not too many outside shots, and the teams were split up. Like you wouldn't see like it wasn't like a first string versus second string and then a third string. I think they were kind of all blended together evenly or as evenly as they could. And you could just tell guys were not used to playing with each other. There wasn't really any set plays that they were running. I think they were running just kind of like a basic offense. They had just barely learned some of the screening techniques and kind of like the high ball screens, maybe running some pick and roll action, but guys just seemed out of place. Guys were timid to shoot the ball, like that first highlight video. And I'll show it again for a third time because it never really gets old, but Philly B was in the corner and he's a good shooter. And Coach Pitino kind of got on him for not taking that shot, which he normally would take in a game, but guys were timid. They didn't want to be the guy to take the shot or take too many shots. These guys were just kind of overpassing the ball, and I think that was just for respect out of their teammates. No one's really found a role just yet. So this was really the only 5-on-5 action that we saw today. It was pretty much just some one-on-one drills, some rebounding, a lot of calisthenics, getting up shots. We did see some post moves out of Daniel Thomas, Nelly, Seiko, and why am I missing the fourth guy? The guy that transferred from BYU.
Atiki.
Yeah, a little bit
Atiki.
limited. He had a little bit. His hand was taped up, so he was a little bit limited. Yeah, so we didn't see a whole lot from him. But again, that's one of the things that we have to take out of longer, taller. Donovan Dent said that in his interview. They're bigger. They're longer. And then Donovan Dent mentioned the weight room work they're putting in. We're going to be stronger. So that what Coach Pitino said again after the season last year, we're going to be this, longer, more athletic, taller. It's here. It's arrived. And how effective they'll be when they start the season, we'll see. But I like the competitive nature of the practice today because they were going at it. They really were. And I like a lot of organized activities and drills and the competitive nature was very, very high today. Like it was when you and I and Eric watched the practice last June, the same kind of competitive nature that it was then. It was there today too.
I want to bring up this question again, just because I wanted to point out something. Just kind of battling for that small forward position, the starting four. It's really hard to say outside of like Nelly and Donovan Dent. Really are kind of the two solidified guys, but for the small forward, kind of playing that 3, maybe 4. Like you didn't even ask about Quentin Webb. Quentin Webb is prototypical 3-4 type guy. He's extremely athletic. He had that dunk off that oop. He's just can get up and rise just above the rim. I'm really looking to him as maybe like one of those guys that can be a surprise, to kind of maybe come off the bench. He didn't see a whole lot of minutes last year, but he's got the build, he's got the athletic ability, and now he's kind of seeming to get into the pace of the game. It might have been a little bit too fast for him last year, but I mean, Ed, you could probably attest to it too. When he got up on that dunk, man, both you and I looked at each other like, who was that? That was Webb, right? Like, I think these guys are just kind of growing into their own. Like we saw Donovan Dent from the freshman to sophomore year, that leap. I think we can kind of say the same for True and maybe Webb to make that leap. And if they can, this team is going to be extremely athletic. They're a lot bigger and a lot longer than last year. But Pitino made a comment in his press conference that he also wants them to be a whole lot more physical because they definitely got exposed in that Clemson game.
And just one more comment for me about potential starting lineup. CJ Nolan was also interviewed, and I think that says a lot to put him out there. A new guy that just moved into town. I kind of look for him to probably start at the 2. He said his job is to be Donovan's running mate. He's willing to go to the corner and shoot, but as we've seen, he can also take guys down low, and he's a mismatch either for bigger guys because he's quicker or smaller guys because he can bang down low. And a lot of experience, 2 years at Oklahoma, before that year at North Texas. I'm thinking in my head, Nolan is going to start. And in his interview, he mentioned that their running mate is True Washington. So maybe they'll start the 3 of them. But like you guys have said, there's a lot of time for it to play out and a lot of options, a lot of good options, I think.
You know what? That's a good point. He's got lineups he can, he really is high on Bavork. He's really high on Bavork. He really is. He said that today because one of the things that you mentioned, Ryan, was the back and forth banter between Jeff Grammer and Pitino. And Grammer asked him, "Who's your ball handlers?" He mentioned True. He mentioned Donovan Dent. He mentioned Nolan a little bit, and then he said Phillip. He said that he could handle the ball, and that's another thing Lee Faria said. Lee gave me an earful today, man, because I happened to be sitting right next to him, and he said, "Hey, there's a reason why Arizona recruited him. Let's remember that." And he's right. So I was an exciting time but to your point, Rick, he mentioned Coach Pitino said this. We got exposed by a bigger lineup with Clemson. I don't know that they're going to start 3-6-2 dudes again. I don't know that. I don't think they will, just by based what he said. But I don't know. He's going to play the best 5. And the other thing is he's got guys off the bench. You mentioned Quentin Webb, Eric, and it's one of those things. We said this last year too. He's got a lot of options. I think he's got more options this year. and the playing time, how you're going to get them in. Might be a little bit more of a running offense than that they do this year than they did last year. So you got some rim runners in Atiki and Nelly, and we don't know the effect of the freshman coming in, but what I saw with the freshman Milicic, gosh, man, those legs! Holy cow, that kid is big for a freshman. He really
they look
is.
like they look like tree trunks in the
Oh man, I
photos
kept
that
saying
I
that to
saw. I
Eric. I was
mean,
like,
they made
wow.
Nelly's legs look small. Even it was impressive.
Yes, and again, remember he's only 18. I'm not even sure if he's 18, but yeah, he's that
35.
was. Well, I'm sorry.
I'm sure it's 35.
Oh, no, you know what? If you looked at
He
him, you're like,
looks-
man, he looked like a grown man already. So I think some of the additions that we saw today, at least I was excited about what we saw today. I really was.
Who the hell is the kid in the little league from the Bronx? Danny
Almonte.
is Danny Almonte, right? Yeah. Here is I got to play this clip one more time. Hold on.
Anytime you have a lot of new guys, you get excited. Like, oh, we're going to miss those guys. There's no doubt about it.
He's got the East Coast thing going that I love. That I love it. Here he is on Rick. He's never going to talk to us again. Here he is on Clemson. Something serious.
I thought Clemson exposed us size-wise for sure.
I guess I was trying to do limited time. I cut quite a bit of that, but here he is on JT Toppin as well. Just wanted to throw those in.
The JT thing the timing was a little bit challenging, but I feel like, he had to do what's best for him. And I don't think anybody would argue that, he had a great opportunity. So, you're losing a really good player, but we've got some options behind him that I think we're excited about.
We talked about JT Toppin, and we had a comment say that, we should, marry Texas Tech, and we're Aztecs fans, which was one of the stupidest comments I'd heard. I'm not a fan. I'm objective here. As far as despite all the UNM stuff that I have in the background, because I grew up here, and by the way, to all of us, Borovichinen, that way we get it right, Borovichinen and Milicevic. I would think the starting five are, Dent's starting. Like, I don't know what mystery that is. I don't think we need the mystery machine to figure that one out. I guess it's got to be Dent, Washington, Nolan, Amzil. I know somebody's going to punch me in the face for Amzil playing the 4. And then Nelly Jr. Joseph. I could be wrong there, but I mean, those would probably be your 5 guys. Ed, I'm going to you because last year at this time we sat here and he said it was one of the best recruiting classes, if not the best. It was the best that UNM had ever had. And you were kind of like, I don't know about that. And I agreed with you. Mm-hmm. The schedule might be one of the best, the non-conference. As we sit here again in June, and I said it last year, on paper, it looks really good. And I mentioned it to Rick last night, and I'm not trying to repeat myself. I don't give a shit if they win the Mountain West Conference tournament. They need to find themselves in the NCAA tournament and win a game or two, because I think that is the ultimate goal. Obviously, this year, what they did in 4 days was phenomenal. Then this town acted like Argentina won the World Cup. It's if they ever make the Elite Eight or the Final Four, it's going to be like, they might as well. They're going to have a canyon of heroes. I think it is Sweet 16 or bust. Throw out the Mountain West. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen San Diego State fan. We've won Mountain West Conference championships. We've done tournaments. It's a Sweet 16 every year or more, and they've played for a national title. I don't know if you agree with me on that, because I think Pitino has taken the steps where it was this, as people have called it, the Lobo Renaissance. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, Z Mountain Shadow. I know they've never made a Sweet 16. I think they technically had before the tournament expanded, but in the field of 64, 68, yeah, they've never made the Sweet 16. I'm very, very well aware. What I'm saying is that it's Sweet 16 more or bust for this team, because this Lobo Renaissance, where it's been, we got better, we've got solid players. You were talking in, last year, the NIT 2 years ago, the NIT, the team looked good. You had two players whose fathers were perennial NBA figures. I just think the Mountain West Conference title stuff is no more. If it wants to be a big boy program and he's taken the steps, I think it's farther and farther in March Madness. And I don't know if you agree with that.
You know what? You made a lot of points there. Now, this is what Coach Pitino, a couple of things he said. We need to take that step. San Diego State is a perennial contender. We want to take that step. We want to be regarded as one of those kind of programs. And he said that, we can't have one season here and then one season there. We need to be at that level. Now, you said it, Sweet 16 or bust. Does that mean the fans are going to go away? Look, you know this is a rabid fan base, right? They hadn't gone to the Mountain West or the NCAA tournament since 2014. They win the Mountain West tournament. You see how people will always flock back. Lobo basketball, we don't need to go over this again, but we will, or I will. It's the king. It'll always be the king, and it's the undisputed champion here as far as popularity. So, as much as I want to say, man, they better get there. They should get there. They haven't got there. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. Do I want them to get there? Absolutely. Do I, are you far off in saying that, heck, this town would go crazy with the Sweet 16? Of course, with a Sweet 16 appearance? Yes, they would. They absolutely would. Has he done things that he said he would? Coach Pitino, I'm talking about, in the offseason. He said we need to get longer, more athletic. They did. We need to improve the schedule. They did. The only major blow he had, and it was an unexpected one at the last 24th hour almost, with losing JT Toppin. Did he try to replace him? This Thomas kid, Eric's right. This kid is fluid. Man, he's nice. God, I was impressed by watching him. But somebody pulled it back on that. They asked him about Thomas maybe replacing Toppin, and Coach Pitino's like, hey, let's pump the brakes on that. Let's see what he does in a game. But when I saw him today, he's a different player than JT Toppin. Much different, fluid, athletic. JT Toppin's athletic too. This kid's got some athleticism. So did JT Toppin. They're different players. But when I saw him, I'm like, okay. So to your point, is it a Sweet 16 or bust? I mean, bust what? Will the fans still flock back? They will. They will. Now, if they have a terrible season and they don't, get into the tournament, or they finish fifth in the Mountain West, people will be upset, mad. I know I will be. And but does that mean I won't come back? Of course not. I'll be back, and but I think to your point, Ryan, has Coach Pitino done those things that he said he would to try to do to get there? He did. Prove the schedule, got long and athletic, got better, he thinks. So we're going to see what happens, but I can't predict. I didn't. We said this last year. He needs to win a tournament game, right? We did say that. They didn't. They won the Mountain West tournament. They got beat by Clemson. And was the season of failure? Absolutely not. There's no way I'll ever consider that season a failure. But now expectations are even higher. So, like I said, I think he's done what he said he's going to do. Let's see how the product plays out on the floor.
I agree with that. I do. I know we're talking about in June. Eric had some internet issues there. He is back. I just think it's winning games in the tournament, because that's where it puts you on the map. And I'm starting to change my opinion that maybe he doesn't leave because he has the ability to build an empire here on the West Coast and the southwest part of the country. And maybe it's not such enticing with what NIL is and what he everybody thought we were shitting on the Pit. No, that's not the case. I understand what it is. I mentioned walking into the rack at Wreckers, and it was disgusting. It sucked. And it looks like it's just a pile of cement. It looks like just cement, but I don't know. I'm just thinking maybe he doesn't leave and he's building something here, and I was totally wrong on it, which I am, a lot on guessing, that I can't predict the future. But Eric, I don't know if you heard some of that. I don't know if Rick or Eric want to piggyback off that, or if we want to cut the commercial break and try to talk some Lobo football. But I know people are here for the basketball. But anybody have any? There we go, Eric, Rick doing it. Sound like sound like a pilot. Do you guys have any other comments on what Ed and I were talking about? Because we talked about that extensively last year at this time, and the season doesn't start for another 4 months.
No, I think I just have to say that I understand that dancing in March and advancing in the tournament is the ultimate measuring stick of like having a successful season or not. But the Lobos had a successful season last year. I mean, from them being preseason number 3, finishing regular season at number 6, and then making the run that they did in the Mountain West tournament and coming away with a Mountain West championship. Like, to me, that's a successful season, and making it into the dance, especially from where this program was, right? I think it's all got to come together in full context. It's not just your team's only good if you make it to the Sweet 16. I mean, being successful and advancing in the tournament is, yes, one way of saying that. But from where this program was 10 years ago to where it is now, they're definitely on the rise. Them getting to the tournament last year, and you said it yourself, watching them play on that floor with the March Madness logo was exciting. And yeah, I think everyone would clearly understand and clearly would want them to advance in the tournament. But there's a reason why March Madness is so crazy and why it has the name March Madness, is because it's absolute madness. Like, some of those games are toss-ups. 16 seeds beating 1 seeds is more of a regular occurrence now, or 15 over 2, than it was probably 20 years ago. It's not so top heavy anymore. And especially now with the NIL and transfer portal, I think there's more parity in college basketball. And there's probably a bigger disparity with the Power Fives and mid majors and kind of the tier below that, and conferences only being able to get teams into the tournament just based off of like the conference championships. But I mean, yeah, with the Mountain West and with the Lobos getting into the tournament last year and getting walloped by Clemson was definitely unfortunate. But in the full context and scheme of things, I felt like they were definitely underseeded along with the rest of the Mountain West. If they would have had the same road that San Diego State had, and I'm not taking anything away from San Diego State, they did get 2 wins, but you can't tell me that if you were to put UNM up against getting the same matchups they did, that UNM wouldn't have made the Sweet 16. Then are you to say that they had a more successful season based on them getting to the Sweet 16 on a lucky draw into the tournament?
I'm not taking away what they have accomplished in the history of the program. I'm just saying, I think hypothetically, if the Lobos make an Elite 8 run next March in 2025, that team will be talked about more than any Lobo team ever.
Oh yeah, well, isn't that obvious?
The Alfred Arrow. I mean, I'm probably knowing what people are saying. The Alfred leaving will be probably a little wiped clean. I don't think people care as much. It's, I don't want to say it's the Boston Red Sox or Chicago Cubs winning the World Series, but I think in this town, at all of those, and I know somebody said that that the Mountain West Conference tournament is a bid into the tournament. I'm very well aware of that. They've been at large. Sometimes I would take that at large bid and get on a run and go and pull it off because it's been done. And when we mention it is, yeah, thank you. I know I'm Captain Obvious, but what I'm saying is St. Peter's of the world have done it. The Davidsons of the world have done it. VCU has done it. Butler has done it. Nobody knew who the hell these schools were until they did that. I know people have UNM on the map, but and I know we have to pay our bills, but I'm going to do this very quickly for Ed. Who was the worst hire, Noodles or Paul Ware? Which hire brought the program down more? And then the very next comment was El Lobo Loco. I became a fan during the Neil era. So yes, the Pitino era is so sweet. But back to the who was the worst hire? The answer has and always will be Mike Loxley. Ed, your thoughts there?
You know what? To me, it's Craig Neal, and I say this because Coach Weir, who I got to know a little bit, had his heart in the right place. He tried to do the right things. What bothered me about Coach Neal is the minute the fans kind of turned on Cullen. I remember him saying that he turned on the Lobos. He quit. He quit on the Lobos, and I remember him saying this in the paper. They asked him about hustle, and he goes, "I don't coach hustle." And when I read that, and I had to read it through. I've been around the game over 50 years, and I read that, and I read it again. I'm like, what? I was done with that guy. He brought it down way worse. Coach Weir, think about the players he had. It wasn't, there's some good players there, right? Manigolds, Vegas Vance, Vontae Hendricks. It was not a good fit. They had some talent. There was some personnel problems, some disciplinary problems, but I absolutely think he had his heart in the right place. He wanted to win here. He wanted to be a community guy. The other guy, as soon as his son left, turned his back on the program. He was a quitter. He was the worst, to me, way worse than Coach Weir. That's my opinion. I never liked that guy, and I still got bad feelings about him. Not that I hate the guy or anything. I just think he quit. He quit, and he said he quit. I don't coach hustle. When I read that, I'm like, you're no coach then. And he was bitter about his son, and to me, that's an easy answer.
Rick, I don't know if you were chomping at the bit to answer that, but
No,
I will let you answer it.
I don't really care about either of those coaches. That whole era was really lost, and I think Neil lost the team when he let Cullen play so much early on when Cullen was not worthy of playing. And no disrespect to Cullen, he's a fantastic player, but early on I didn't think he was ready to play, and that kind of lost the team in my eyes. But going back to present day here, I think Ryan has a point. With the Lobos taking these steps forward, the expectation now is raised every year, and both Donovan and Coach said that today. Coach said he wants to build a brand. Well, Tamari is right. That takes a deeper tournament run. Look at Gonzaga. It took them multiple runs into the tournament until they could consistently recruit at a high level, which they're one of the top programs in the country now. If you want to build a brand at a smaller school, you have to do something, unfortunately, like they did or like San Diego State did. And the expectations are that high now for all Lobo fans after what they did, even though they were sixth in the conference. And I think it's going to be a dogfight again. Those top six teams are all going to be the top six teams again, and they're going to be in a fight to the top. So the expectation is there, and I would have to agree with Ryan in this ordeal here.
One more comment, if I could, Ryan, and I just want to make this real quick. Eric, you wanted your Capital team won a championship in 2004. It takes a balance. It takes the right calls. It takes a lot of things to win championships. We know that. It's not easy to do that. So I think, Eric, I'm sorry, Ryan, you mentioned Davidson has done it. Other teams, the Aggies have done it. The Aggies got to a Sweet 16, right? They got to a Final Four. New Mexico, unfortunately, if you think about the game, I'm thinking about the game against Louisville in '95, or when Kenny and Clayton Shields and Spider Smith has the ball against Louisville. They're down by 1, and I'm thinking, man, okay, 8 seconds left. He's going to drive to the basket. He throws it to David Gibson. And no, nothing against David Gibson. David Gibson's a fine player, but the bounces, the plays, the calls, they just haven't come together. And, everyone here has watched games enough. Ryan, you watch probably more than anybody. It's tough to win championships. It's tough. And it's tough. New Mexico just hasn't had everything go right to make that Sweet 16 run. And, Eric, you made a great point when you said all these upsets and things that they don't call it March Madness for anything. There's a lot of other things, internal factors that sometimes you can't control. But that doesn't make the fans any less rabid and say, well, we they want to see a Sweet 16, so we'll see what happens.
Look at the Denver Nuggets. Like, just recently, how hard is it to win a title? How hard is it to go back to back? I'm sorry, Eric.
No, I was just trying to look at something real quick. I wanted to point something out because I think Rick makes a valid point with that, right? Like, it's easy to compare this program with a Gonzaga, but you know what UNM doesn't have that Gonzaga has? A coach that's been there for 24 seasons.
Good point.
That's And then you also mentioned San Diego State. How long did it take Steve Fisher, who's had Ryan Dutcher under his wing for how long, including the Michigan teams, right? Like, you have to build that sustainability. You have to build that culture, and it's got to be able to stay consistent within a program. I think UNM probably could have gotten there, and I really wish they would have. But Alfred was here, what, 10 years? Was it 10 years? Ed, that's probably a question for you. I don't know how long he was here, but he signed that 10-year that he renewed his contract for 10 years, and then he was gone 2 days later to UCLA.
Yeah, I don't think it was.
If you
10.
want to, you have to comparing apples to apples.
I'm
mean,
not.
they-
No. I'm just saying in reference to how hard it is to win a championship in a sport. That's all the comparison is. Sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
No, well, that's just the point I was trying to make. Is like, look at the teams that we want to compare ourselves to and the success. Like, how many times did Gonzaga make the actual tournament in order to make a deep run like that? Like, how many times did they get upset in the first round or the second round? And I mean, I think that's more comparable than comparing the program to like a Big 12 school, a Big East school, ACC, something like that, right? But that's what it takes, is having someone at the leadership level there for 25 straight seasons.
6
Mark?
seasons. Alford was at UNM 6 seasons.
See?
6 seasons, yeah. Mark Few this will be his 26th season, or this past one was his 26th season. I don't think. Okay. They've been
It'll-
95.
It'll be his
They made the-
25th season.
25th season.
Yeah.
Look at the NCAA tournament appearances. 99, 2000. They've made the tournament 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006. They've made the tournament every year. They've been in the Sweet 16 four years in a row.
Well, that conference is changing, right? So they're going to finally get some competition, and I don't know if they'll obviously be in the tournament, but their road in the West Coast Conference is tougher. I forget who they added, but it was 2 more competitive schools, I believe.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, they did add. I'm having a brain fart. I do have to do this because he's my guy.
Miguel Sanchez.
Neil was the worst hire because he was primarily interested in playing his kid at the point. Ruined careers of several Lobos better suited.
God, one of those guys was Anthony Mathis. Like, I don't think we ever saw the full potential of Anthony Mathis, because he rode the bench the entire time Neil played. And then when Weir came over, Weir plugged Anthony Mathis in, and everyone quickly became acclimated to how good Anthony Mathis is.
Anthony, pure shooter. West Coast Conference had a
GCU.
GCU and Seattle U. Yeah.
That's good to pick up.
Yeah, I think on West Coast they are going to port. I still don't understand how that works. It hurts my my head. Didn't we beat Gonzaga in our one meeting? I'm stumped on that one. Usually that pops right off my head. I don't know if I'd have to look that up. I don't know if you guys are looking to end the show, or you want to talk a little bit of Lobo football if you want to come back. I'll take that as a no.
We can just cover it real quick. I mean, they had 13 transfers. We can just cover that real quick and wrap
all right.
it up.
Well, yeah, we did talk. We did talk a lot of We did talk a lot of Lobo basketball. I want to throw this out there, and how beautiful this looks. This was announced today. College football playoff schedule. The first rounds are at college sites, on campus. The quarterfinals are the Fiesta Bowl, the Peach Bowl, the Rose Bowl, so they can play the Rose Bowl on the first, and then the Cotton Bowl, and then the Sugar Bowl, and then the playoff semifinals are the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl this year. I just had to throw that out there because it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, because I love college football. I even printed out a copy, and I don't do that anymore. All right, Lobo football. Added some guys from some big time schools to
don't know if that necessarily can pan out, but Garrison Walker, defensive lineman from Auburn, Randolph Kapai, a linebacker from Nebraska, Javante Royal, cornerback from Pittsburgh, Ishmael Burdine, cornerback TCU, Don Tatum, a safety from Wazoo, Cam Watts, quarterback from Texas Tech. Some of the names there. And then the running back from Campbell. You know what, Eric, I'll start with you. I see those big name schools. Obviously, you went there for a reason. I'm not so sure it totally pans out for them. But when I do see players that have played in, well, the first thing that popped in my head with the kid from Auburn was NMSU beating them in Auburn, Alabama. But I don't know. I see those big schools, and yeah, there's potential there. It's a good thing, but I don't know. What do you think? Because we have access to Lobo basketball, and you would think that UNM football has plans for the Death Star. You have no idea what's going, no idea what's going on.
Oh, the first thing that kind of jumps into my head when you see transfers that are tied to schools like that in big conferences like that, and these additions are just kind of being announced right after the portal and everything like that is kind of either coming to fruition or kind of coming to a close. A lot of those big programs added big time names or paying some of these athletes a lot of money to play football there. And for some of these guys that are on second string, maybe third string, had been in the program a while, or maybe they're brand new, see the writing on the wall that there's just not going to be any playing time there. And to them, it's more important to go somewhere where they're going to play versus where they're going to receive a paycheck or receive a little bit of money through that revenue share that's going to be starting next year. To me, if I'm an athlete, I want to go somewhere where I'm going to play right away. And if you have to kind of take a step down into like a tier 2 type program, tier 3, but you're going to play all game long and you're going to start all season long, I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, UNM still has NIL for football. I think they were, 25 athletes that were getting paid. But to come in and when you were going to basically not play and then come into a program like UNM where you're almost going to be an automatic starter or at least see a good portion of playing time, I think that's kind of what this is.
I do have to interrupt you guys because I have to do the breaking news alarm, as I always do. Habtom Samuel, the runner for UNM, he's a national championship. About 40 minutes ago, he won the men's 10K. So UNM has a national championship. So and a national champion. So congratulations. Hey, congratulations to him. Sorry to steal your thunder there, Eric. I don't know the fine tuning of coaching track and field. Joe Franklin was there for years. He was a phenomenal head coach. He left for Louisville. But he was really renowned here. And I think the women's team won a national title after I graduated or left the Daily Lobo. So again, big news there. Lobo's cross country track and field star Habtom Samuel wins the 10K title in Eugene, Oregon. So he's a national champion. I didn't mean to steal that thunder. Did anybody have any other thoughts on Lobo football when track and field star is outshining them? Rick, I'm looking at you.
Just based on what we kind of heard at spring practice and only seeing 65 bodies out there, I think adding anyone at this point is good. But when they come from bigger programs like this, obviously they've had some experience, and that's great to see. So like Eric's saying, and like we've heard, Coach Mendenhall is allowing everyone a fair shot at competing. So I would expect these guys to come in and give it their all, because they're not coming here, like Eric's saying, to sit on the bench like they've been doing. Some of these guys have more experience though, and they've gotten some snaps, where they've been, but they're going to get a fair chance due to the numbers and just due to, I think, the type of talent on the roster. So it's exciting to me as a fan, and I think it'll definitely help solidify the defense. It looks like they got 3 cornerbacks, a D lineman, and a linebacker, and a safety. And per Sean Ryder, it sounded like the secondary has still been a little questionable. So this will add some other talent to the mix, which will be helpful, obviously.
And he does run the 5K on Friday. Thank you, Jimmy H. Jimmy Hester. Ed. You know, we'll dive more into football. We opened the show with Air Force football again. Thanks to Sean O'Toole from Mountain West Wire. But to me, I joke, I'm from Missouri. You got to show me. I haven't seen shit yet. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are. But again, I like the big, not the big names necessarily, but the big names of the school.
Rick played football, so he's been saying that New Mexico doesn't. He was wondering where the numbers were going to come from. So I think they always say camp bodies, but look, you got some guys that played at some big schools. But you remember one thing though. Okay, so we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it, right? He hasn't won, but remember, he hasn't played any games yet. Coach Mendenhall, I'm talking about. The other thing is, there's been some secrecy, a shroud of secrecy kind of around the program. The not signing the contract thing kind of loomed over. Like, is he staying? I never thought he was going to leave. So I got to say that he's got a very tough schedule. UNM does, but I've got to say you're right about show me. But I'm anxious to see them show me, because I could sit there and say he hasn't done anything, but he hasn't. September 14th or whenever they play isn't here yet. Now, when they start playing and things aren't going, I think we have to be realistic that he's inheriting a program. He's got to turn the whole thing over. And I said this: you might not see the Mendenhall effect until year 2. I'm willing to give him that chance. I'm willing to give it to him. So I think the guys that he signed, I'm excited. Rick made a good point. You only had 65 bodies in. Now you got more depth. We'll see if these guys any of them can play. But when I read that, I'm like, okay, you got the cornerback, a cornerback, a safety, a linebacker, a defensive lineman. So I'm not saying these guys are the next coming, but I think it helps them as far as depth goes. And Rick knows better than anybody on a football roster. There's people getting hurt all the time. You need depth. So I'm anxious to see what they got.
Ronnie Chavez, I think Tyreek Austin Cave, who came from WVU, began his career at Miami, will be a stud. Yeah, I think that's the most promising name out of all the transfers. Yeah, I'm getting anxious. As the clock, it's really going to hit me when NCAA football comes out in about a month, which I can't wait. I got to cut that sound clip, Rick. It'll come full circle. It's just It's crazy to me that we talk. Okay, it's not crazy to me, but here we are in June and we're talking in depth about Lobo basketball. And it's funny because we're not far from the Texas Panhandle, where you're living and breathing high school football. Terrible comparison again. In other news, former running backs, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who I thought was at Ole Miss. Not good journalism by me there, but again, I don't do this full time. He actually went back to Arizona. I know that he really preached about how much he liked Danny Gonzalez. I know Danny Gonzalez is the special teams coach. Maybe that had something to do with it. The quarterback, his last name's Fafita. He was phenomenal last year. We talked about that last night, Rick. I think Arizona is going to be good. They're probably going to be ranked in the top 25, if not be looking at like a top 30, 40 team. The line's already out. UNM is a 30-point underdog, according to Circa. And Dorian Lewis signed with Alcorn State, and Dorian Lewis came from one of the schools in Rio Rancho, right? I think kudos to them. It's kind of a bummer they left, but I'm kind of enticed because Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was honorable All-American last year. That Arizona offense, man, flew. I think they gave Washington a hard time. They went in and punched USC in the face, although everybody seems to punch USC in the face with the defense that's paper thin under Lincoln Riley. I think it's cool that at least that I understand what the transfer portal is, but somebody like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who came here and got an opportunity and was the highlight of the team last year and had a great season. Those were Dontrell Moore type numbers. I think that's very cool. I don't know if any of you guys wanted to chime in on those guys signing elsewhere, but I'd say Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt going to U of A and being on a Big 12 roster. He's going to see probably a lot of touches. I don't know the depth of the running back at U of A, but I think he's probably going to see a lot of time as an honorable All-American. I don't know if anybody wants to chime in on that.
I would agree. I would just say it's an odd situation how he bounced back and forth between schools. We kind of touched on it yesterday. They should definitely have a shot, possibly to even make the playoffs, I think. So, yeah, like you're saying, I don't know what other running backs they have. It's funny that he ended up back there. He had photos up with Old Miss also, I believe, on his social media. But I'm happy he finally found the spot there and excited to see what he can do. He was a great player.
And he's still doing commercials for 505 Sports Venture Foundation, I believe, that are still running on ProView Networks. No offense, Ed, but I don't know if you want those on there with him at U of A just for continuity.
None taken, none taken, man, none taken at all. No.
Hey, I want to thank. Does anybody have any other final thoughts? Very quickly, Eric and Ed, who do you like in the NBA Finals?
You know what? I'm hoping Dallas because I'm a Lakers fan and I don't want Boston, to pass them as far as championships go. But it's going to be a great series. I'm hoping Dallas in 6. We'll see.
Everybody's on Dallas, so I'm changing my bet to Boston.
I like the Mavs too. Luka's on a tear right now. He's hard to stop. And then when you got Kyrie, and they have a bunch of role players too, man, that are really playing really well. Derek Jones. Some of the names slip my mind now, but yeah, I think the Mavs, exciting team to watch, and it's new, right? It's like someone that we're not used to seeing. We're not like watching Steph Curry and LeBron James in the NBA Finals anymore.
I just got to go back to this.
Nothing against the Bay Area guys, though, Rick. So,
well, in a weird way, it is strange not to see either of those guys in the finals right after about a decade of seeing one or both of them. So it's kind of strange the last few years here. But yeah, it's cool to see some new blood and obviously some of the best players.
86% of the public has taken, I think, Dallas not only in game one. I think it was game 1, and it's 6.5. But I think it was to win the series because you can make a bet on the series. I got to go back to this real quick. I know we got to jump off. Ronnie Chavez, I'm going to snap this. Football wins 6 games this season. Put money on it. FanDuel is over a game and a half. I'm sure you can go. If you know somebody in Vegas, I'm sure they've got the season here. Yeah, John, we know. Vegas has the Lobos at football at a game and a half over under. 20% chance they go winless according to the wise guys. I don't know who the wise guys are. I'm gathering that they might be a YouTube channel, or you're just referring straight to the Mafia.
Referring to the books.
Yeah, probably the books. Yeah, that's saying a lot. Again, I'm sure there's a lot of people that watch this want me to be proven wrong. But I don't know. Looking at that schedule, holy hell. The gauntlet of death, as I call the Mountain West Basketball Conference. I want to thank Sean O'Toole from Mountain West Wire. He was an awesome guest talking about Air Force football, kind of recapping some spring football, looking ahead. Going to try to do that next week with somebody who covers another member of the Mountain West Conference, a team in the Mountain West Conference. Appreciate all the listeners, the viewers and listeners, and everybody chiming in. Again, we really, really, really appreciate it. Love it, because without you guys, we wouldn't exist. Eric, on behalf of Eric Moulton, Rick Thompson, Ed Nunez, I am Ryan Tamori. This is the Pit Press Live. Again, very quickly, we'll come back to you next Tuesday. We went live tonight because we didn't want to compete with Game 1 of the NBA Finals tomorrow night. So we will talk to you next week. Everybody have a safe weekend and enjoy the start of the NBA Finals and the NHL Stanley Cup Final.